Warning, the following video may contain sequences which some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
In today's world, it's common to find people who either had or are currently going through a rough upbringing. In some cases, kids are forced to grow up a lot faster, even take on responsibilities at their age, to assist in the household. In extreme cases, you'd sometimes find children having to drop out of school or get a part-time job because the circumstances are just that bad. There are many reasons for this. Sometimes you grow up in a single-parent household, and circumstances beyond anyone's control can force families into tough spots, literally living from paycheck to paycheck at times. Sadly, in other cases, children can be neglected by their parents and are forced to do things on their own. Other times, a parent can die, leaving their kids behind with no real person to turn to. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. Why am I talking about all this? Well, our case today falls right in the bracket of children with rough upbringings. However, not for the reasons that I mentioned before. The reason was far more sick, twisted, and evil than you could imagine. Today we discuss the case of Brian Coulter, age 31, and Gloria Williams, mother of 6, age 35. We will discuss them both as they are both responsible for the incident that took place in the case. Brian more so than Gloria, as he killed her 8-year-old son. Then after, Gloria, instead of being a mother, abandoned her remaining children, opting to live with Brian, away from them. In Houston, Texas, Gloria Williams was a mother of 6, who abandoned her 3 young boys after her boyfriend, Brian Coulter, killed one of her sons by beating him to death. Gloria, instead of doing what any sensible and loving mother would do, instead of calling the police, decided to abandon her remaining children. Those who lived with her, that is, to go live with the man who took her child's life. Before we go any further, it would be best that we find out a bit about Brian and Gloria, and what prompted this cruel and heartless act by the couple. Before meeting Brian, Gloria lived with Linda Smith. This was the grandmother of one of her sons, Javian Kirkland. Where was the father? Incarcerated. Linda took Gloria and her children in, when the boy's father was in jail. While living there, Linda described Gloria as a kind and decent person. She didn't drink or do drugs while staying with her, and just seemed like a pleasant individual. However, she asked Gloria to leave after some time, because according to her, Gloria began behaving promiscuously, and that entire idea did not sit well with her. For good reason too. The entire reason she took her in the first place was because she happened to be the mother of her grandson. While her son was in jail, she decided to take care of his lover. But if Gloria began behaving in that way, though the child's father was never part of the boy's life, Linda likely concluded that it was basically condoning Gloria being unfaithful to her son, and that's just something Linda could not do. Gloria didn't resist, and she did leave. Linda then stated that from then on she lost all contact with Gloria and her grandson as well. Linda states that she could barely recognize the person she was seeing on the news. That was not the Gloria she knew. The Gloria she knew would never do such a thing. But Gloria did indeed do what she was accused of, and if that is truly how Gloria was in the past, then that would mean that she changed for the worse when she met her current boyfriend, Brian Coulter. Brian and Gloria started dating a few years ago, evidently sometime after she had already left Linda's home. Coulter liked to drink, and when he did, it would often bring forth violence. However, the violence did not seem to be directed toward Gloria. She had no signs of physical abuse from Brian. No, Brian reserved the abuse for Gloria's children. He would repeatedly beat them. Brutally. They were never let out of the apartment. In fact, Gloria had a 10-year-old son, Trayvon Lee, and he claims that Brian would beat him as well. His face, stomach, legs, buttocks, nothing was off limits to him. He treated them like a punching bag. So much so that when the police found the children, Trayvon had a swollen jaw. Why? Because Brian hit him so hard that he broke his jaw 3 weeks prior. The 10-year-old's injuries needed surgery to be mended according to the authorities. The boy stated that Gloria was aware that he had that injury, however she did not seek medical attention for him. It takes a special kind of person to be able to condone this sort of behavior from her significant other. Mothers are usually strongly attached to their children, however this mother cared more about her boyfriend than her own kids. However, let's not go too far off topic. As stated earlier, Brian killed one of Gloria's sons by beating him to death. It was her 8-year-old Kendrick Lee. This happened on Thanksgiving evening in 2020. More than likely, Brian had been drinking, since drinking usually brought out his abusive side. Her sons Trayvon and Javian had witnessed the murder. They had to watch as Brian repeatedly kicked and punched their brother Kendrick until he stopped moving. The children states that he punched and kicked Kendrick in his face, feet, back, testicles and buttocks. When Kendrick dropped to the floor, Brian did not stop. He kept kicking him. When Kendrick's eyes turned and he stopped blinking, Brian covered him with a blanket and walked out the room. When Gloria went into the room later to check on her son, she realized he was dead, and she began crying and fighting with Brian. The next day, Brian apologized, telling her that he lost control and just punched him, and kept punching him until he went to sleep. Jordan Lee, her 15-year-old son, stated that he thought she would have called the police after that night. But she never did. Instead, she moved out of the apartment, leaving Jordan, Trayvon and Javian to fend for themselves in a house with their brother's corpse. Gloria claimed to have seen part of the attack, but she did not report it, for fear of losing custody of her children and going to jail, also because Brian told her not to. They moved about 6 miles away. Trayvon told the investigators that Gloria did come by the apartment at a later date and lifted the blanket off of Kendrick. What she found was that his body was already very decomposed, with some areas already showing his skeleton, covered in roaches, and his hair had also fallen out. Though this detail is gruesome, just the description of the body gives us an idea of how long it took for Gloria to return to the apartment. You see, after you die, your body goes through stages of decomposition. Within 24 to 72 hours, your internal organs would begin to decay. 3 to 5 days after, your body would bloat and a foam would start to leak from the mouth and nose. 8 to 10 days later, and the body color would then begin changing. A few weeks after that, and the nails and teeth would start falling off. And after a month, the body would start to liquefy, meaning it would start to become softer and start transitioning to becoming a skeletal remain. This is most likely when Gloria came back. However, it could have been sooner, since roaches feeding on the body could have accelerated the decomposing process. Regardless, those kids were alone for either just under or just over a month before Gloria found it necessary to even look at Kendrick. The kids stated that Gloria would stop by and drop off junk food for them, then promptly leaving after. It was clear that Gloria was trying to distance herself from this entire situation. She didn't want to deal with living in the same house as her son's body. And she also didn't want to report it because of her boyfriend and her own fears. Jordan was the one who had been caring for his younger brothers. He had the help of neighbors who brought them food and would let him charge his phone when the electricity to their house was cut. One of the people who helped them was Erica Chapman. She had been feeding Jordan, not knowing that he had 2 younger brothers. She stated that when she first saw him, he was sleeping on one of the slides. She quickly realized, however, that the boy's mom was rarely ever home. She would sometimes show up with noodles or snacks and drinks. Jordan would then run to get the food, before running back to the apartment. After doing this for some time, she tried to offer him cooked food, however he didn't accept cooked meals. He only took packaged snacks, fruit and pizza. Trevor Thompson was another who helped him. He was the one who allowed him to charge his phone. Trevor did not know he had two younger brothers either. Although Trevor did have a suspicion Jordan wasn't alone. He stated that on one occasion he had given the boy pizza, and he asked him on another visit if he liked the pizza he had given him. And Jordan responded with, "What? The first pizza we had?" That made Trevor wonder why did he say, "we." But he didn't pry further. Like Erica, Trevor didn't want to ask too many questions, because they didn't want to end up causing Jordan to distance himself from them. Jordan did a good job of keeping a low profile. Everyone who saw him just figured he was a quiet and discreet boy. So much so that the neighbor living next door had no idea anyone even lived in the apartment. Apparently, not too long after the murder, neighbors did file complaints of a foul odor coming from the apartment unit where the boys lived. However, it would seem like the building's management didn't bother checking to see what the issue was. If they did, those kids would have been found much sooner. How long were they there? For a year. The boys were alone in those conditions for about a full year. And what was Gloria doing all this time? Enjoying life with Brian. She posted a picture on Instagram a few weeks after Kendrick's death of her enjoying frozen cocktails with Brian. A few months after that, she showed off the jewelry Brian got her for Valentine's Day, captioning all the luxuries with, "I love him very much." Brian's Instagram was filled with him having large plates of food, covered in diamond jewelry, and talking about his love for his girlfriend and family. All the while the boys were alone and struggling. Also, I should mention that the only reason the boys were able to stay in that apartment in the first place was most likely because it was being paid for with Gloria's government assistant checks. This made it more obvious that they were trying to hide the murder. Because if she didn't keep paying for the apartment, management would have probably shown up eventually to evict them, and if they did that, they would find the children. So to prevent that, the apartment's rent was always paid for. While they were living large, Jordan, Trayvon, and Javian could barely eat. Jordan had had enough. He sent a text to his mother telling her he couldn't take it anymore, then he called the police. When they found them, they were malnourished, they had signs of physical abuse, was living in a roach-infested abandoned apartment, and was in the presence of the skeletal remains of their brother Kendrick. After giving their statements, the police searched for Brian and Gloria, and they were found in the library, ironically, searching up information about their own case. Gloria Williams has been charged with injury to a child by omission and tampering with evidence, and Brian Coulter was charged with felony murder. That is just where it's at for now. But prosecutors state that this was just the start. And for good reason too. After all the things mentioned, murder is certainly not the only thing he is guilty of. We could easily add assault and child abuse to that list among other things. As for Gloria, child abandonment and concealing a murder could easily be added to her list. What these two did was just heartless and cold-blooded. And they deserve whatever that will be thrown at them during the upcoming court trials. The only real consolation about this entire situation is that the children are now in the custody of child welfare services. They are no longer in that apartment with a constant reminder of what happened a year ago. They no longer have to struggle to get food. They can get all the medical assistance they need. But I fear that the psychological scars will be there for a long time, if not permanently. Something like this is traumatic for an adult, far less for a child. These boys have been through so much horror at such a young age. It truly is sad to see. Some people don't deserve children. Gloria Williams chose another man over her children's well-being and lives. She chose to abandon them instead of being there for them, instead of getting rid of the person who took the life of her child. instead of doing the right thing. I'm not one to judge anybody. But what do you think? Did this woman really deserve her kids? Granted, it would seem she was different before meeting Brian, but that doesn't change what she did. A loving mother would never do something like that. That much is not up for debate. All we can do now is hope that justice will be served in full and that Jordan, Trayvon, and Javian find a happy home in which they can grow and put all this behind them. It will be hard, and maybe the scars will never go away, but I do hope they find some sort of closure and that their brother Kendrick rests in peace.